Hi there, this is Lisa Stens. Welcome to video number 2 in the Distress Oxide Inks series. Today I'm going to show you a fun technique called smooshing. We're going to start out by putting some ink directly on our craft mat. We're going to use some blues and greens for this project, and I'm going to use chipped sapphire, peacock feathers, mowed lawn, peeled paint, and a little bit of mustard seed. After I put all the colors that I want on my craft mat, I'm going to spritz it with some water. And you can tell that as soon as the water hits the ink, it activates it and it almost turns like a milky color, a little bit more muted. So I'm taking a piece of Distress watercolor cardstock and I'm placing it directly on top of the ink. I'm not pressing it down all the way, I'm just sort of tapping it in different sections, different parts of the paper and moving it around so I get different colors in different areas. So I'm adding a little bit more blues. It was turning a little bit more green, so I added a little bit more blue ink to the craft mat. And I'm going around, and as soon as I feel like I've got enough color, I'm drying it with the heat gun, and then I'm going back and adding more color. And when you add color on top of another color and it's not dry, it gets a little bit more, it blends better. So if that's the effect you want, then you don't even need to dry it in between. But if you want to have the colors lay on top of each other so you can see more of the different colors, then you want to dry it in between. And you can add layer after layer and just keep going with this. And so I'm drying it right here, and you can see that it is a little bit more muted in that section on the bottom left side there. So I'm drying it now, and then I'm going to add a little bit of water to it. And I'm spritzing the water directly on top, and then I'm going to blot it with the paper towel. If you remember in video number 1, I actually hit it with the heat gun before I blotted it with the paper towel, and that made it have more of a bleached look. This time I wanted it a little bit more muted, so I hit it with the paper towel and then the heat gun. And I'm really liking the way that this is turning out. So I'm going to go ahead and dry this completely and then add just one more spritz of water, let it sit for a second, and then blot that off with the paper towel. And I think I'm done. I think I really like the way that this is looking. I could keep going forever and add more layers, but I think it looks good. So now I'm going to set that aside and use this 3D flower die to cut out some flowers from some vellum. I actually used the 2 smallest flowers in the die set and cut them out using some vellum. And I'm just curling the edges down a little bit here to give it some dimension. And I'm going to adhere the layers together with some 3D foam dots. And then I'm going to add a bluebell pearl right in the center. Then I'm going to take the larger flower that I die cut and color it in with a dull green blend marker. And I'm going to use these 2 petals for leaves on my card. Since I don't have any leaves, I thought these would match and coordinate well with the vellum flower. So I'm just coloring both sides of 2 of the petals with the marker, and I decided that I needed them to be a little bit darker. So I went ahead and colored them in a little bit darker, and I'm just cutting them out to look like leaves. Then I'm going to go ahead and go back in again with the darkest shade of that marker and add some lines to make it look like the veins on the leaves. And I used the Thanks Thin Cuts die again on this card like I did on the card in the first video, but this time I used the shadow die to cut a piece of vellum to soften it up a bit, and I used a piece of the watercolor cardstock to cut out the letters. Now I'm going to adhere that smooshed piece of watercolor cardstock that we made earlier to the front of a card base. And then we'll go ahead and adhere the thanks sentiment and the flower to the card front to finish it off. I think it turned out really fun. I love the background. It's just really unique. Here are a few other samples that I use the smooshing technique to create. Hope you'll join me for my 3rd video where I'm going to show you emboss resist, water painting, and watercoloring techniques. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.